Hello, friends. Today's conversation is one I think many of us may wonder about why modern relationships are actually harder to sustain than they used to be. Or that's something that I've been reflecting on quite a bit lately. On one hand, we have so much freedom, more awareness, and there's a lot of conversations around healing. Yet somehow relationships still feel so fragile. And many of us are deeply feeling lonely in relationships. So today I wanted to explore this topic on a deeper and more honest way from a place of curiosity and reflection. And I am really happy to be joined by Carlos, who's a psychologist, to help us unpack why relationships today can feel so complex and how it has evolved culturally and emotionally. So, Carlos, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Simi.
As a psychologist, Carlos, you have seen, I am sure, couples from all cultures, all age groups. And from listening to all of their struggles and challenges, do you think relationships today are objectively harder than it was before? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, how much time do you have? This is a topic I can speak on for hours because I think that there's so many components, right, that play into the kind of relationships that we find ourselves in, how we navigate those relationships. There's so much. There's so much there, Simi. So I think this is a beautiful topic to get into. Um, I think that there's a lot more complexity in today's day and age that we're navigating in relationships than maybe before. Like one of the first things I think about is just like the cultural influence, right? Or the generational influence of relationships. Like some of us come from cultures where marriages were arranged, right? Or when you were very young, you were 16, 17, 18, 19, you found yourself in a marriage or in a relationship. And that's very different, right? You have a very different identity or mindset at that place than somebody who's in their 30s or 40s. I think that there's a different mindset in which you go into a relationship, right? Like I think we used to really sort of embed ourselves in values like family values, like, hey, I'm married to you and these are the vows that we've made and I don't care how hard it gets, we're going to work through this. You know what I mean? And I think in today's day and age, relationships feel so much more disposable. I don't know if that's because we just have access to more people. Like I think I used to be on dating apps many years ago, and the idea of like having human beings that you just swipe through based on very surface level criteria, that does something to the human heart, right? I think how that impacts relationships. Like it's so easy to say, why am I going to tough it out with you? Why? Like things are getting hard. There's resistance in the relationship. I'm just going to bail, right? I can just, by this evening, I can have a date with somebody else. And so, like, I think less of us are compelled to really sit and do the work, the hard work of a relationship, right? We're just not as willing to do that. I find it interesting why most couples believe that they got into a relationship with each other, right? Oftentimes we think it's because attraction, we like the same kinds of movies, right? Like, again, we think about this surface level stuff. But as a psychologist, I can tell you that when we dig into sort of what's underneath, oftentimes we find that we're either playing out some old pattern from a family dynamic, we're playing out some pattern of seeking something that maybe we didn't have in our childhood, we're replaying some role that we played in a past relationship. Like there's a lot of complexity there. And, you know, it never fails to sort of amuse me when two people come to see me as a couple to do couples counseling, when we start to unpack, you know, what it is that they see in their partner, what it is that they think they're getting from their partner, how they show up, what they're projecting. It's a lot. There's just a lot there. But to go back to your question, if I can, I think that a lot of us are more aware. right? Like we have more access to therapy, to self growth, to self knowledge. And obviously, in that, we have to address and explore the interpersonal nature of who we are as individuals. Where, like, my mom and dad never had to do that, right? They
Right.
were just in a marriage, and like we have kids, we pay the house, we put food on the table, and like the rest we figure it out. And if it's strained at times, it's strained, and so
Mm.
I think there is a lot of reasons for why it's different now than it used to be.
So you mentioned we are more aware now. We have more access to therapy, and our the previous generations didn't as much, right? They didn't have a lot of this information that we do now. So I hear a lot of people saying they may have stayed because it was survival.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I agree with that, because I do know it's not like everyone who gets a divorce right now are wealthy. It's also people who are financially struggling. So to me, when you're financially struggling, that is survival also.
Yeah.
How do you so is it possible that they stayed together, not just necessarily for survival, but also the stigma around divorce? Could it
Yeah.
be, or is it because they genuinely believed that it wasn't disposable? Like I'm really curious why.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, here we can get into so many nuances, right? Like survival may be too strong of a word, although I do know people that stay in relationships for that reason. Um, I often talk about, Simi, that as human beings, sometimes we will tolerate a certain level of discomfort in our lives, um, even when it doesn't feel great, because it's known, right? It's like the evil you know.
Mm,
And the idea of stepping into something that is unknown is so much scarier for us, right? The unknown of being single again, the unknown of being divorced, the unknown of will I find somebody else, the unknown of will somebody else ever love me? Like, there's a lot there. And so I think sometimes, out of this state of fear, out of this unknown, we might just keep tolerating what feels uncomfortable, right?
mm,
I think on another level, again, our childhood has a lot to do with how we show up in relationships, right? Like if you look at attachment theory, right? Attachment theory
mm,
tells us that the way we bonded with those early caretakers imprints in us and dictates how we're going to show up in relationships later on in life, right? I'll give you a perfect example. I grew up in a home, and I love my parents that were doing the best that they could, immigrants that were working a lot. They didn't have a really great relationship. So I grew up seeing a lot of conflict, a lot of
mm,
chaos, um, two human beings that didn't treat each other with very much respect. And so the first maybe 6, 7, 8 years of relationships that I got into when I was 18, 19, it felt very normal. It was like normalized that we argued often. And so that
mm,
wasn't a strange thing to me. So I didn't see how unhealthy that was. Right. And again, nothing against my parents, but that's just kind of what was modeled for me. If
mm,
sometimes you grow up in a home where, I don't know, for whatever reason, you walked away from childhood feeling a deep sense of insecurity, a deep sense of low self esteem, maybe because your parents were very critical or your parents often made you feel less than. That's the narrative you then carry about yourself, right?
yeah.
You probably don't have the confidence to seek out a relationship where your expectations are that people treat you really well. Why? Because probably, you've been treated kind of poorly for most of your life. That's probably what you're going to seek out because you don't know how to seek out anything outside of that. So I can't tell you the number of people on an individual level that I've worked with where we've had to do tons and tons of work around unprogramming your belief system about yourself and what you deserve and who you are, and then watch how that plays out in the relationships that they choose.
Mm, very true. So yeah, I really like how you explore like different spectrums within different generations. So you had said like the relationships now, like our generation and like the newer generation, treat it as something disposable, right? Like when we are born into a family, we don't necessarily treat our parents or our siblings as disposable, but for some reason, when it's marriage, even though a it's in your family, that person's your family, and you have children with them, and those ties will never go away. Still, it seems like the title can change from this. A brother's title never changes, right? Even if you never speak to them, it's still your brother.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
is interesting. And looking back, you were saying like the back generations back then, there could have been a lot of dysfunction, yet they stayed because it wasn't disposable, because the value was, we stay together, we make this work. And and listening to all of that, it reminds me like we're in actually a beautiful time to tie the two together. So like we understand that dysfunction is not necessarily good for the children or for yourself or for your partner, but we have like so much access to therapy, and we definitely have more emotional awareness these days. And if we can bring the relationship is not disposable part with all those aspects, that actually brings me some hope. And maybe I'm just like really old fashioned, because I do like to see relationships thrive, romantic relationships thrive. Uh, Not in a romantic movie way, but like in a spiritual, we're here to grow and evolve, and what better than that one person mirroring you the entire time throughout your journey.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for introducing that. Right. Like, um, I think understanding too, because one of the questions that will often come up here is like, well, what if I'm in an abusive relationship? Do I have to make that work? And you know, I think for your audience members, just know that we're speaking in generalities, right? Every single person and every single couple has its own dynamic that we need to explore and understand, right? Each of those individuals. So I would never condone or ask somebody to stay in a relationship that feels abusive, that feels damaging, that feels hurtful, right? That's just not okay. It's not healthy for anybody. Um, but sort of if we imagine challenges in relationship on a spectrum, um, I don't think that it's that that end of the spectrum it's good. I also don't think the end of the spectrum where you just bail at every sort of inconvenience is good either. And
Mhm.
everyone, there's a happy medium there for everybody. But what you just introduced there too is like right on this soul level. And that's another thing that I deeply believe. Like, I believe that every human being that we encounter during our human existence is there to serve us in some way, is there to mirror for us maybe something we need to learn, some place we need to grow, right? But I think that especially here in the US, we have this very individualistic I, me, mine way of thinking, right? It's all about your comfort, it's all about your happiness. And right, like if you're not here to make me happy, that I'm gonna set up boundaries. And if you're not here to make all of my dreams come true, you're toxic. And so there's just this way in which we've become so egocentric about what we think we're doing here, right, on this earth. And that's dangerous, right? Because that's when people start to feel disposable for you. And that, like, I know so many people send me that, this sort of narrative that we've had in this culture of like boundaries, right? Respect my boundaries. And like people are setting so many boundaries that they literally close themselves off. They live in this little lane, in this little island, because no one can trigger, and like no one can make me upset. No one can no, work on your stuff. That's where the work is. People are
Mhm.
triggering you. Go inward and see why that's triggering you. Get curious about that, right? And like that's been such a shift in my own life where I recognize that whether it's my wife, my son, my friends, my mother, my brother, if there is some way in which something in our relationship dynamic raises something in me that's full of friction or even slight, you know, I should probably look at that.
Mm.
Probably see the ways in which they are gifting me an opportunity to see where I can grow in my compassion, grow in my ability to be non-judgmental, grow in my ability to be patient, grow in my ability to be more loving. And I can't tell you, like, even in my own relationship with my wife, how what a gift that that's been, right? That when we start to experience some form of friction, I can point fingers at her and be like, you need to fix that. And that's your problem. And, you're not meeting my expectations. Sometimes that's necessary. But I think that the real sort of work for us is in going inward and recognizing, wait,
Mhm.
why am I being impatient here?
Yeah.
Why is this triggering something in me? Why does this make me shut down? Why does this make me angry? That's where your growth lies.
Absolutely. I love that. And thank you for sharing that, especially your personal experience. I resonate with that because I was married before too. My first marriage, I can honestly, objectively say now that I was pointing my finger at the other person more frequently than looking within, because you come with a narrative of what the relationship should look like based on your culture, based on the movies you may have watched, based on the expectation of what a partner's role is or a husband's role is in my case.
Yeah.
And when those expectations are not met, I was constantly going, well, it's because of you. And I was never taught to be like, well, if it's triggering me, let me take a moment to see why this is a
Yeah.
problem for me. Why is this challenging? And I'm not talking physical abuse, none of that,
Yeah.
or emotional abuse. I'm just strictly talking about the expectations we had. And when it's not met, you point, externally, right? And so I am married to Joe now, and when people ask me, oh, you got a second chance, so life must be so great. And what Joe and I said when we did our vows was, I, I don't, I can't remember exactly how we said it, but the gist of it was, don't look to me for happiness, and I won't look to you for my happiness.
Right.
And so throughout the marriage, I think it has been a lot of going inward. So if the reason the relationship is, it feels peaceful for me, and then I guess Joe would have to share his side, how if it feels peaceful for him or not. But it's peaceful for me only because I keep looking at, like, okay, why is this coming up? Why do I have this need? Or why, so it's never like you get a second chance and you find this perfect human being and all of a sudden everything is great, like the movies. No, it was just that one piece was missing. And it's not to say that even if I looked within in the my first marriage that I would have stayed with the person. I'm not saying like the outcome would have been different,
Yeah.
but the experience in that relationship would have been different for both of us. It can still split up, that's not the point, right? The point was, at
Yeah.
least for me, right, looking within is not to have a certain outcome. It's just, we like growing helps
Yeah.
you and the other person in many ways. So yeah,
Totally.
resonate.
Yeah. And again, this kind of goes back to my thought about the ways that our life unfolds, whether it's in relationships or work, or right, like, sometimes we get fired, sometimes we lose a job, like, right, that's all part of our path, right? Like, part of your path was going through a divorce, part of my path was also, part of my path was like 20 years of sometimes really toxic and unhealthy relationships to finally find where I needed to do the work, what were the patterns of people I was attracting into my life, to finally find, right, the love of my life, my soulmate, if you will, or whatever. But I think we also have to normalize that maybe that's not the experience for everybody, and that's okay too, right? I often talk about, you said this really beautiful thing there, Simi, about you and Joe, and sort of not seeking something in each other. And I think that that's where a lot of relationships kind of go awry, is we sometimes, because there's something so deeply missing in us, we seek that in someone else. And then we put on them the expectations that they fulfill that in us. And then we only feel like we can get that from that person. So when the relationship starts to feel a little rocky or anything seems to threaten that, which, when it comes to love and relationships, anything can feel like a deep threat. What we do is we shut down, right? Like I train a lot of young therapists, and like the joke that I tell them is couples or adults, they're just young children. We're all just little children afraid of being hurt, rejected, of feeling abandoned. And as adults, we've learned strategies for how to protect ourselves from that. So when I have a couple that comes to see me and they point fingers and they scream at each other and they shut down, like all of those strategies that we use are simple strategies to stay safe, to protect ourselves. All of our protest is what I call them. And all that is this young child on the inside feeling their love or their ability to feel connected to another human being feeling threatened. And what most of us learned to do was to protect, right? To put up walls, to have a sharp tongue, to say, to pull away, to create distance in the relationships, to sabotage, right? Like there's all these different strategies that we utilize, but all of that is in the service of like protecting my heart, right? Because our hearts are sensitive and our hearts are full of empathy and compassion. And the idea of allowing somebody to threaten my connection, my bond, right? The most vulnerable and raw thing that we possess feels so darn scary for people, that we act in these ways that we don't sometimes realize are actually driving us further away from the thing that we're wanting, which is that connection.
I really want to go back to you said we are deeply missing something in us, so we seek it outside. But before we even go into that, I like what you shared about the child, the inner child piece that we bring into the relationships. So, in your experience or opinion, do you think we are in relationships to heal the parts that were traumatized growing up?
Absolutely.
And the reason someone like Thich Nhat Hanh or Saint Francis of Assisi, I don't know, I can't think of anyone else right now at the moment, they don't need relationships or the kind of relationships that we all seek, which is romantic partnerships. Is it because those parts have healed?
Yeah, spot on, Simi. I'm, for those folks that don't know me, I'm somebody that's been doing sort of that inner work, that inner healing work for most of my life, right? I started therapy when I was 19 and have engaged in therapy, retreats, right? Reading the book, working on myself in all kinds of ways, but especially in relationship. And this is probably like 6 or 7 months ago, my wife and I were having a discussion about something. And I walked into our bedroom and she was laying there with my son. And she was sharing something with me. I don't remember what it was. All I remember about that moment was having the following thought. I remember looking at her and thinking, there's nothing you can do that can hurt me. And what I mean by that is, it was like, there is nothing that can happen between us that would devastate me, that would shock me, that would break me, that would, right? Like that speaks to how much work I've done on myself, how much self-love, self-compassion, how much I know myself, how much I'm rooted in who I am in the world, that I don't need anything from anybody. I am so fulfilled in my being that somebody's love or lack of love, someone's opinion, whether good or bad, it wouldn't phase where I'm at, how I feel, who I am, and how I'm going to show up in the world. And the freedom, the absolute liberating freedom of that thought and that feeling is, I think, what we are navigating in relationships. That's what we are looking for. That sense of wholeness, that sense of completeness within ourselves. What happens for many of us is we think that only someone else can fulfill that. We don't know that that lives inside of us. Or we expect somebody else. Like, imagine that. Imagine putting that treasure at the hands of someone else. And what it might feel like if that in any way feels shaky or threatened, the ways we shut down, the ways we're going to respond.
I think that is probably what you were mentioning. We seek externally because we are missing something. And as soon as that missing is gone, we feel whole, we feel complete. And that's the other.
If I can just correct something there that you said, that is vitally important. It's not that we're missing something in ourselves. It's that we believe we are missing ourselves. Because I know that you know this as well. We are whole just the way we are. It's about uncovering the layers of our stuff, of our trauma, of our past experiences to find that wholeness.
Yes.
Right.
And this, beautifully said. Yes, absolutely. And this takes me back to, when people have been married for a long time, some of them there's like dysfunction, or there's a lot of challenges because they have different personalities. But there are also relationships where after, let's say, 6 or 7 years, people are unhappy, not because there's anything wrong with the other person. When one partner in a relationship is going through that experience where they just feel unhappy, it has nothing to, they can't even come up with anything wrong with the other partner. It's just, they just feel like there is a better relationship out there. And then they choose to leave the relationship, or they're told, well, rekindle the relationship, try to bring back the spark. And my experience, this is, it's not like I've been married like 20 times. Just from my experience, I don't believe it's about bringing spark back or romantic connection back. It's about understanding that the ego is constantly seeking for that bliss or the happiness. And it doesn't have to be in a relationship. It can be with food. It can be with shopping. It can be with traveling. It can be with anything, or drugs, or the next high. So once you know that's what the ego does, it's easier to recognize that and be like, oh, yeah, this is just part of this human experience, and doesn't mean we have to act on everything that,
Totally. Yeah. Another beautiful invitation to get curious, right? If that is your pattern, if that's the thing you see unfolding in your life, that nowhere you look, nothing you do is bringing you happiness, that's an invitation, right? That's an invitation to go inward and try to recognize where that's coming from. Because, right, I mean, we can talk about the ways that, the society we live in right now is just dopamine, 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 quick, fast, more, more. And what that creates for our nervous system, for our minds, is a perpetual state of feeling incomplete. And if you imagine that, right, because you said it, it's not just the relationship. The relationship is just another vehicle in which, right, another example in which that's showing up in your life. This person isn't enough for me. They need to be different. Yeah, this job isn't enough for me. This needs to be different, right? And so you're right. I've seen people get stuck in this hamster wheel that is this endless seeking.
Yes.
Endless.
And I share that because I know a beautiful couple. I used to work with them, and they were doing great. And then one day, you know, wife just feels like there's no spark. And there's nothing wrong. Like she can't explain. And it's so hard to understand because we always want some problem to say that this isn't working. And this takes me to the something I shared with you through text. The teachers of consciousness, you know, of expanding consciousness or evolving in consciousness, also going through these kind of experiences in relationships has been very interesting to me. So Dr. Shafali, she has openly shared, she wrote the book Conscious Parenting, and she has openly shared that she went through a divorce. And this is after her awakening, after she became very popular in the field as an author. And it got me thinking, she hasn't shared much about why, but she did mention she couldn't be authentic. And that helped me realize that it doesn't matter if you're awake or not. Because if we are in a relationship, there's some need. If not, we would not be in a relationship. We wouldn't be seeking a relationship. There's something the ego needs that needs fulfillment, is why we may be in a relationship. And if that's not getting fulfilled, or is it the ego, or I guess I'm confused in some ways, because you want someone who is so conscious and awakened to be like, oh, they've got it figured out.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's a big question, my friend. I don't know that I have the right answer. I can only share what I understand to this point from where I'm standing. I think it's about the duality, right, of this human experience, right? A part of me understands and recognizes and knows that you, me, and everyone else in this world is a soul that came here to do some work. And that the particular work that is involved in this human experience is full of the very thing that our soul needs to continue to evolve, right? To continue to come into union with the one. And, part of the experience of this earthly plane is to experience love and loss and pain and attachment and all of the things, right? They're here for us. So there's a way in which I see myself and recognize that before I took this incarnation, I saw this whole life put before me. And I was like, that's what my soul needs to evolve. And so, I went and I had the parents that I have and the relationships, the bad ones, the good, all of it, right? That's on one plane. On the other plane, I see myself stuck in this human experience where I'm constantly struggling with getting lost, and not seeing through that veil, and getting lost in the ego and getting lost in my human desire and my want and my preferences, and having to keep a foot in both of those worlds. Right?
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? That's hard. I mean, I am someone that's had an awakening in this lifetime. And so I can, right? Like I was just having this conversation with my wife yesterday on a walk. And, I happened to mention something about reincarnation. She says, well, I don't believe in that. And I said, you don't have to believe in it, right? In order for it to be or not be. But I imagine how it must feel for her to not understand some of the sort of spiritual experiences that I've had. So I think that sort of starts to maybe get to it, Simi, is that recognition of what we're doing here as souls and what we're doing here as humans. The human part of us is navigating all of these attachments, attachment theory, early relationship dynamics, right? Like if I can just share with you, I'm a psychologist who has been in therapy for years. My wife is a marriage and family therapist who has been in therapy longer than I have. She started therapy when she was 13. And that was a product of having grown up in a home where like no one knew how to talk about or process emotions. And she was just a very emotional person. So at 13, her parents put her in therapy and they're like, we don't know what to do with her. Like you fit. My wife and I go to couples therapy. It is
Love it.
just
Yeah.
profoundly amazing to see two humans who get all of the psychology behind human behavior and relationships and still get stuck in our own patterns, our
Mm,
patterns of fear, our patterns of attachment, our patterns of love, right? The
yeah.
ways that she's still waiting for me to disappoint her, like many of her early family members did. The
Mm,
ways that I feel that sometimes I'm not enough for her, the way that I did in my early childhood, right? And so, like, that stuff is there, and I think it's there with purpose.
mm,
My wife, I can say, I can have all of the complaints in the world about how I wish she could be different, but the truth is she has been the most beautiful mirror and the most beautiful teacher for my soul's evolution.
yes.
For me to recognize the way me, not her, because all of us are here to do our own individual work, and she's just part of that work for me the same way I'm part of that work for her. But like, there hasn't been another human being who has taught me more about patience, about going inward, about looking at myself and my triggers, about
Mm,
with myself and with her. But if I see her as just the enemy, if I see her as this person that's not fulfilling my needs, then, like, that's going to shift that entire energy, right? And you
yeah.
said something really, really important there about, sometimes when we lose the flame in relationships. There's this quote I came across many years ago. It said, peace feels like boredom when you are used to chaos. And I can't tell you the number of times after finding my wife and our relationship starting to feel grounded and peaceful and secure and consistent, where the part of me that was used to chaos wanted to blow it all up. Like, I
Mm,
can tell you times that I've been laying in bed and just being like, oh my God, this, like, I have everything I've ever wanted in a relationship. And this other part of me is like, let's end it. Let's go be single. Let's go have fun. Let's go travel. Let's go have more excitement. It's like, wait a second, what? This is like what you always wanted. So it's not uncommon. I hear this from a lot of either couples or individuals that come work with me. There's just not enough fire in the relationship. There's not enough spark. Like, I've seen people turn away healthy relationships because ultimately what they're needing on the inside is friction, chaos, to be resolving something, to be fixing something. The fire, the spark that they're often talking about is just this deep need to be in friction.
oof.
I just want to, like, put that out there for that person who might be saying, it's my partner, it's my partner. There's not enough fire or spark or, whatever. There's these different words that we use, right? And what
Mm,
might be happening there is that there's this just deep inner need to keep being in, yeah, different ways of saying it, right? Being in friction, chaos.
yeah. So, because it's so familiar.
It's familiar.
Yeah. Like we
That
don't know.
you know how to deal with that constant chaos, right? Like, even though you may not like the chaos, you know how to handle it. It's what's familiar to you. It's what's known. And what's scary is what's not known, the version of you that you haven't had to navigate yet.
The peaceful, the blissful, and blissful, I don't mean like everything is going well, but like just content. Like we don't know how it feels to relax the nervous system in a relationship or just in life in general, right? We're just so used to the
Totally.
roller coaster ride that we think that is living. So if the soul is just here to experience life as it is. So my expectation, personal expectation of a relationship needing to continue a certain way for the next generations, is that still an expectation that you would say I need to release? Is that old fashioned me
I love the awareness there, my friend. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would say from the soul level, there's attachment there, right? There's preference, and nothing wrong with that, right? I think if we can shift away from this idea, that the soul is to find a happy marriage and love, like but maybe that's not it, right? Maybe the soul came here to experience a whole lifetime of loneliness, to learn how to be at peace with loneliness, right? I can now look back at all of, and again, just even labeling them unhealthy or bad is wrong. But like all of my past relationships that maybe didn't serve me, right? That we can sit here and say we're toxic, we're bad, we're not loving. They were still purposeful. They were as purposeful as the loving relationship I'm in now. They also needed to transpire in my life.
Yeah.
There is ways that I grew in those relationships that I couldn't grow in a healthy relationship. So I honor those too. I honor those individuals, whether they know it or not, as beautiful participants in this life experience that gave me something, a gift, a ginormous gift.
Yeah.
So I tend to start to move away from right and wrong, good and bad, and recognize that they were all in the service of something much grander, which even this human sitting here can't fully fathom and understand, because I'm just human.
Do you have a preference of how you would like to see relationships evolve in your son's life or son's generation?
Yeah, I mean, do you hear the contrast between what I just said and what I'm about to say? Like, of course, right? Because I'm human, I'm full of preferences and
So
desires
father,
and
parent, yeah.
Um, and I've talked about this on my podcast, Simi, about as a parent, I both recognize my role in my son's life as a father and guide. And I also know that my son is a soul who's come here to do his own work. And that parts of that work I am a part of and parts of it I am not. That there will be many other people that come into his life, like people have come into yours and mine and all of us, to teach him lessons. And some of those lessons are going to come with love and patience. And some of those lessons are going to come with lots of pain and disappointment. And my heart breaks in devastation to know, like, this kid is so caring. Like, we'll get back from a walk and he'll go get water and he'll be like, here, daddy, for you. And he'll go get water for his mom before he drinks water. Like this, right? Like, we were having dinner the other day and he's like, mommy, thank you for dinner. He's like, daddy, tell mommy thank you for dinner. And I heard that. And in the next moment, I started to cry. And my wife looked at me and she's like, what is it? I was like, people are going to come along and break his little heart. And there's not a damn thing I can do about it. And there's a part of me that understands that that needs to happen. There's another part of me, obviously, Simi, that wishes it doesn't. He finds love and that it all works out and it's all perfect. Of course. But I know that all I can do is prepare him the best that I can. I can prepare him by teaching him to navigate hard and difficult feelings, teaching him to navigate disappointment, teaching him to stay grounded in himself, teaching him to find that version within him that is whole and full and complete. And then just hope, right? Pray that, like, the path doesn't knock him around too much like it has me or maybe some other of us.
Are there couples who have gone through very difficult, stormy phase in their relationship and came out beautifully? If you could share what helped them, an example without names, what is it? What is the work that they did that they got through it and now thriving?
Yeah, I've seen it with my individual clients who, started off with just really unhealthy and toxic relationships and have, through their work on themselves, right, have now gotten into super healthy, grounded, peaceful relationships. And I've helped couples do that as well. Even when I work with couples, part of that work with them is for them to do their individual work. Like I tell them early on, the best thing you can do for your partner is the continued work you do on yourself. Part of that for me as a therapist is going back into the family dynamic, working through their traumas if those live there, working through those attachment ruptures if those live there, right? Like if you're somebody that's anxiously attached, why is that? What's missing? What's the narrative that you carry about who you are? Maybe I help somebody work through the part of themselves where they communicate better or differently because maybe that wasn't modeled for them early on in their upbringing. That's something my wife and I are always working on, right? I grew up in a house where you screamed at each other and you shut down. She grew up in a house where if friction was there, people just avoided and swept it under the rug. So you can imagine how much work we both need to do, right? But I see it, right? Like I see it. And so the sort of mental shift that I want people to have is before you bail on that relationship, like, okay, I agree with you that it's not the best relationship. Maybe it's not making you happy. Maybe there's just full of friction. Fine. But before you bail out, let that relationship serve as a vehicle for your growth, for your awakening, for your movement, right? For you to find where you need to be healthier. Because if you don't, you're just going to take all of those patterns and all of that stuff into your next relationship. And you will play out the same dance over and over again until you do the work on yourself. I remember years ago, I had just started grad school, and I had a series of 3 relationships that were pretty back to back. And I think that because they were so close together is why I had this insight. But 3 relationships that just fell apart on me that were just really toxic, like really unhealthy. And I remember thinking to myself, man, like, why do I keep attracting these crazy women? And sorry for that language, but you have to remember, I used to be a fireman. I used to be a Marine. This is a past version of me. And the next thought, Simi, was, Carlos, the common denominator here is you. You are doing something that is attracting this kind of person into your life by the way you act, by the things you seek out. This was all happening around the same time that I was taking a class on marriage and family therapy and like early family dynamics. So like all of this stuff came to the surface and I was like, I need to go back to therapy. And I went back to therapy for 8 months to understand how my relationship with my mother, with my father, my upbringing, how that impacted how I shut down in relationships, how I communicate, my expectations for. So, like, doing the inner work on ourselves is how we make our relationships complete. What I find is, as I calm down, as I'm less triggered, as I'm more patient, as I'm more kind, as I'm more, non-judgmental, I create a space for my partner. I create a space for her to step in that feels safe. I create a space that feels good for her nervous system. And I create a space for her to do the work that she needs to do on herself. And on that grander scale, that her soul is here to do as well.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I have missed our conversations that we used to have. Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, my friend. It's so good to see you.